So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen.
All right, Michael, we're back to the only list in all of film that is empirically accurate and 100% correct. Both of ours are. We're the only two in existence that have that type of a list for 2019. So let's give the people what they came for. 1 through 5, right after we give them our top 3 docs in descending order. Your number 3.
My third favorite documentary of the year, I, again, did not see enough documentaries this year, is a film called Los Reyes. It is co-directed by Bettina Perut and Ivan Osnavikov. Excuse me. Los Reyes is the name of the oldest skate park in Santiago, Chile, which is where this documentary is set, because it is the home of the documentary's 2 subjects, which are 2 dogs named Chola and Football. There are no talking heads in this documentary. There are no, there's no voiceover. The only real dialogue we hear is from the skateboarders who frequent this skate park, as they kind of talk about things that teenagers talk about: buying and selling drugs, doing drugs, talking about girls, their kind of troubled home lives. But the perspective of the documentary is firmly with these 2 stray dogs who live at the skate park. It is in no way an overly precious dog film that you might expect, I guess, for a documentary about 2 dogs. It is very much just kind of an observational slice of life work about taking up the perspective of a creature that cinema doesn't give a lot of attention to. Mm-hmm. I think one of the reasons we go to the movies is just to see the world through the eyes of others, and there's no reason why we shouldn't do that to our 4-legged friends.
Whether it's in Ketty.
Also a great doc. And I think it's fairly unsparing, right? Because these are stray dogs. It's hard to watch. These dogs live in inhospitable conditions. But we do see moments when people say bring 2 doghouses to the skate park. Some city workers who want to give these dogs at least a little shelter over their heads. They are initially quite weary of these new homes, but eventually warm up to them. You get a sense for what a good day is like for these dogs, which is when they find a new tennis ball. A bad day is when the weather is bad. What's really interesting is that, you see these dogs as strays. They're living on, the margins of human life. And additionally, what the documentary does is hone in on the insects that kind of live on these dogs, which sounds kind of awful. And it is hard to watch. But there is something just kind of true about nature and how creatures kind of live off of each other,
and ecosystem and all that.
Yeah.
Symbiosis.
I think the rhythm of the film is phenomenal. It's really easy to watch. It's not very long, and it is just an okay time to spend 70 minutes with a couple pups. I didn't mind, and I think it's a really formally accomplished documentary. It's called Los Reyes. It'll be available in June for rental.
Cool. It's for purchase right now, I believe. You said from Grasshopper Films?
Pre-order.
Gotcha. Okay. Then my number 3 is a little bit different. It is called
Is this still a good time?
We have the time you need.
We have got to overcome this idea that people don't have the right to criticize our religion just like we criticize everything else.
You can't say that the central message of Islam is pacifism, whereas you could say that of a religion like Jainism.
I don't accept that there's a correct reading of Scripture.
There is a link between belief and behavior.
How do you talk about this honestly without empowering right-wing illiberalism?
You may have the Bible Belt. We Muslims have our own Quran Belt.
Islam and the Future of Tolerance.
Very different.
It is my, I believe it was my pick halfway through the year as well. This is a documentary picture that recaps a conversation essentially that was had between an atheist and a Muslim reformer. The Muslim reformer's name is Majid Nawaz, and he currently lives in Britain, and he used to be an extremist who spent some time in prison with other radicals, and that experience changed him, and they cover that as well as he does in a number of conversations you can access on a podcast. The other half is Sam Harris, who has the Making Sense podcast, in which he's had conversations with Majid, as well as Douglas Murray, who has a brief part in the documentary. It's just one of those subjects that, we need to interact with. There's not a clear right way to move forward, but there is a clear need to have these conversations. And I think that the title kind of says everything you need to know, and I would encourage anyone to watch it. It's available for rental on Prime, and Islam and the Future of Tolerance is definitely a subject that the world has to grapple with, and I think that this documentary does a great first step.
Still a blind spot for me, one I still need to check out.
Your number 2.
My number 2 documentary is... Honeyland, co-directed by Tamara Kotevska and Eljubo Stefanov. I tried my best there.
And it has nothing in common with number 3.
Dogs, bees, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And,
outside, what a good day looks like, what a bad day looks like. It is pretty similar.
Yeah, for those unfamiliar with Honeyland, it follows a Macedonian beekeeper by the name of Hatice Muratova, who lives in a remote village in the mountains of Macedonia with her elderly mother. Her beekeeping practice is thriving until she gets some new neighbors, a family who takes a stab at beekeeping themselves, and through a combination of incompetence, short-sightedness, and greed, threaten to ruin not only their own likelihood of success in beekeeping, but Hatice's as well. For more on this doc, you can go back to Doc Talk Part 3, I think it would have been, on Drinking the Movies. I think there are 3 things this documentary does quite well that I was quite taken with. One, I think it's an allegory for the value of environmental stewardship. One of the principles of Hatice's beekeeping practice is that she never takes too much honey, too many of the honeycombs away from the bees in order for them to continue to thrive. She can't take everything that they produce. I think there's something there about if you're good to the environment will be good to you. Pretty simple. Secondly, I think it's about being good to your neighbors and being cognizant of the impact you have. This is very much a kind of comedic story in a way, until it gets quite tragic about troublesome neighbors that almost everyone can relate to. And thirdly, I think it's about family, because we hear a great deal about Hatice having never married, having never had kids of her own, and instead devoting her life to caring for her aging mother. So I think it achieves those by the intimacy that they reach with Hatice, and the level of trust is just kind of astonishing. It's available for rental now, and highly recommended.
I would agree. It's a good documentary. I would highly recommend it. And for anyone that wants an update that's already seen it, she does have her own apartment now in a city. Proceeds from the film, I guess, are going to that in some capacity. So if you purchase it or rent it, some of that money will end up with her to help her live a life at least near people if she's, even if she doesn't have family. I believe she's living in a city near one of her brothers. So she does have human contact again and all that stuff. So,
what's your number 2?
My number 2 is a very similar film about a woman who grew up in Brazil with a party family, essentially, that was tied to the socialist reformers of Brazil. And it is her experience with how the political sphere has changed in Brazil. What appears to be a non-militaristic coup takeover of the government, the gangsters that lead and back the capitalistic and globalistic success or fall of the country taking over. Maybe it's a little bit different than Honeyland, but it's really fascinating. It's available on Netflix. It really challenged me on what I knew about South American politics and in general, and specifically about Brazil. The angle that it presents is very different than the angle that I see on every single headline of the news that I'm fed from Brazil. It's not dissimilar in idea to Oliver Stone's The Putin Interviews, although I took those with much different grains of salt. They were, however, extremely informative of the way that the Russian media machine works, and I think that this shows me a difference between on-the-ground experience and the headlines that I get a continent away.
This is one of my regrets. I keep seeing this pop up on lists of top docs. Definitely one I will catch up with.
It's extremely reflective and very useful for anyone. I would recommend it. What is your number 1 documentary of the year 2019?
My favorite documentary is called
What Happened Last Week?
5 people got shot.
5 people got shot. Come to find out, I grew up with the girl. Her and her baby got shot. You baby smaller than your brother. What time I said be inside?
When the street lights come on.
When the street lights come on. When the street lights come on and y'all still outside, then you punish. You got that, Ronaldo?
Yes.
What You Gonna Do When the World's on Fire?
I'm gonna look for it and not be able to find it for rental anywhere.
So the distributor is Kim Stim, who say on their website it is coming soon to DVD and digital platforms. Hopefully that is within the next couple months. Again, thankfully I saw this I was able to see this because of an independent theater in Seattle.
Which one did you catch it at?
I saw that at the Beacon.
The Beacon.
Thank you to the Beacon.
Free plug.
Plug. It's directed by the Italian filmmaker Roberto Minervini, and it's set in New Orleans during the summer of 2007. There are 3 different strands to it. One follows 2 young boys who are around the age of 10 or tweens, who are being raised by a single mother. Their father is in prison. Another strand follows a bar owner named Judy, a middle-aged woman who's trying to keep her bar afloat while also caring for an aging mother. That certainly rhymed with a certain strand of Honeyland for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the third follows the local chapter of the New Black Panther Party as they kind of respond to and protest against this wave of racially motivated violence that swept across the South in the summer of 2007. Most striking about it is this really crisp black and white cinematography that is always framing these people in the most beautiful of ways. Not in the same way to me that something like Black Mother did, where sometimes I felt something was a little off about how those characters were posing in a way for the camera. Whereas this is much more naturalistic. It feels like there's much less, artifice to it. It's very just natural in the way he's capturing these people as they go about their lives and not imposing any more narrative on it than whatever just happens to them. And it cuts between these strands in ways that are more poetic than sort of guided by narrative, not trying to like force more connections than there obviously are about these African Americans and the way race is sort of informing different areas of their lives. So yeah, I don't know. It was just how poetically wrought it was, and its willingness to just listen. It doesn't seek out a arc in the way other great documentaries do. It just wants to be with and listen and hear these people as they go through troubles that kind of define, our time in a lot of ways. So I was really moved by it. Thought it was gorgeous. Hopefully it comes to digital platforms soon.
I would like to see it. But until then, I will let Asif Kapadia's documentary.
Maradona. Oh, brilliant play by Maradona. Still going.
Diego Maradona be my number one documentary of the year, and I'm pretty sure if I saw any of yours that I haven't seen, it would still be number one. This is a fantastic documentary. Yeah, I was spitting a little bit of shade, a little bit of fire. I believe this is another documentary you haven't seen?
That's correct.
Okay, so it would be your number one. There you go. I don't like soccer. You do. That's how I know it would be your number one, because this is a documentary about a soccer player who, if you remove 2 letters from his last name, it's Diego Maradona, and there's something fascinating about it, to the point where the way he was perceived by numerous clubs was to be the savior that couldn't do any wrong. His duty was to the people, his duty was to the team, his duty was to the club, his duty was to win and to sacrifice himself to do it. And he did that, and they never let him go after he did it for them. And it's entirely interesting to think about modern sports, or more modern sports, like and interactions that we see with clubs trading superstars in soccer, but also with LeBron leaving Cleveland, going to win his titles, coming back to Cleveland, bringing them a title, then leaving to LA. That when I watch this movie and I see how they just don't let him leave the club after they trade for him after his first injury, it's heartbreaking as you watch this descent into drug addiction, gang affiliation, and you get to know the internal politics of a small part of Southern Europe in a really weird way. And when you get to the end, all you feel is empathy, compassion, and hope. And I really, really loved this documentary. And the final sentence that I said in my review, and that I'll say here, is if anybody was going to edit and assemble the footage to tell the story of human history, I would want it to be no one other than Asif Kapadia.
You said it's an HBO doc, correct? Mm-hmm. It is interesting the way some HBO docs seem to pop into the conversation and others just don't have the heft behind them, marketing-wise, I guess. I mean, I think everybody I've seen who watched this doc really enjoyed it. I feel like it maybe just didn't get the marketing push. That's like maybe they doubled down on Finding Neverland, which I know you were cooler on.
I think everyone knows we were cooler on that.
Yeah. I'm just kind of surprised given the response that people have had to it being very positive, and yet I feel like it hasn't jumped out into the conversation in the way it should since it's available.
Yeah, I think that it's partially marketing. I think it's also the nature of the film. It is a soccer superstar from Europe, not from America, born in South America, I believe, not born in North America. So there's just...
It's not Michael Jackson.
Yeah, there's very little in the way. It's not Theranos, there's very little ties here. And his last documentary film, Amy, was something a lot more Eurocentric that a lot more people clicked on because they loved Amy Winehouse and they still love her. And this just isn't that, but hopefully as the years wear on, this will be as well remembered as I've heard Senna is, which I still have to get to. But yeah, that's our top 3 documentaries. It's time to get back into the meat of the business. What is your number 5 film on the year?
My number 5 is...
Mr. Weidel! Mr. Weidel!
Oui. Weidel, l'écrivain? Oui.
Die beiden Wiese, die Schiffspassagen.
Transit from German filmmaker Christian Petzold.
I love this movie a lot.
Is this in top 20?
Yes, it is.
I like it.
It was number 13 for a long time.
It stars Franz Rogowski, who was my favorite actor of the year at the mid-year point of 2019. He plays a political refugee in Paris who takes up the identity of a deceased writer to flee to Marseille, and from there he hopes to find passage to Mexico.
He also likes to sit in a cafe.
He does. And eats delicious looking pizza and coffee, as Europeans tend to do. So this is essentially transposing the events of World War II to present day, in the sense that there's no period decor to what we're seeing. We're seeing Franz Rogowski's character, Georg, flee from this fascist state that seems to resemble like Nazi Germany, or occupied France, I should say. But what we see looks like contemporary France, which I've described this to people before since I loved it, and multiple people have said, like, what a gimmick. And I don't think it could feel, any less like a gimmick. I think it's fascinating when you watch it. I think I understand that response on paper. But I think this is a really interesting hybrid of conventional emotion in a way, because this does become a romance. He meets the wife of the deceased writer whose identity he has taken when he arrives in Marseille. There's a romantic angle there. But it's also about him being caught in statelessness and
what people without any hope do to assert their choices.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a critical scene.
Yeah, I think his performance is great. And yeah, that conventional emotion blended with this kind of high concept art film is just a really, like, one of the most original films I think I saw this year.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved it. That's Transit, which is available for rental now.
And it's a great movie. My number 5 on the year is a film on nearly everybody's list.
Elle vous attend.
It is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. We had the pleasure of going to see this at the closing night of the Queer Film Festival here in Seattle.
That's right.
And boy, was I not prepared for one of my favorite cinematic experiences of the year. I think we went right after we finished recording, essentially. Just hopped down to Capitol Hill, went in, ready for some sort of a period piece, and what followed was a swooning film of desire deep humanity and artistic reflection and masterful storytelling with incredible performances from every single actress, not just the top but the bottom. The way that they navigate the scenes, there's an undercurrent of taste that tells you there's more here, but it doesn't force it down your throat. It lets your own expectation lead you awry. There's a particular scene that I love on the beach in a cave. There's some other scenes that I love near the end, following opera, looking at a painting. When I think of those moments, I am stirred. And a film that can stir me in retrospect is a film that belongs on any of my lists.
Yeah, easily the most romantic movie of the year. Second place being miles and miles and miles away from Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Ask me tomorrow and it would be on my list, no doubt.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film. So that's number 5. So what is your third favorite official soundtrack on the year?
My third favorite original score is courtesy of Daniel Lopatin, and it's in...
So I want the Celtics to cover. I want the Celtics halftime. I want Garnett points and rebounds. What do you know? I don't know. I just know.
Uncut Gems. It's an electronic score. So much of that movie is just sonic chaos. There's people talking over each other, and the score is often, just adding to this commotion that we hear and sometimes can't even make out, and that all just adds to the, forward momentum and intensity of that movie. It's just a dope score. I'll leave it at that. Uncut Gems.
My number 3 is...
Dolomite is my name, and fucking up motherfuckers is my game.
What'd you do to your hair? You look like a pimp. It's all pretend. I just created a character. Dolomite, you a trip. Pull on that.
Oh, that's a
weed. That's right. Whatever it takes, I'm ready to do it. I got to be totally outrageous.
Dolomite is my name, from Scott Bomer, and I'm so happy I get to talk about this film at all. It's in my top 20. It's a fantastic comedy. It's probably my number 2 or 3 comedy on the year, if not my number 1. It's so special, and the score is so fun. I would encourage anyone to open Spotify, search for Dolomite is My Name soundtrack, and just have yourself a good old funky time.
I think I might have underrated that movie, just given how often I feel good when I think about it. So
right?
I would.
We're both smiling already. All I did was say Dolomite is my name. Number 2.
My second favorite score is in... An Elephant Sitting Still by a prog rock band called Hua Loon, Chinese band. It's mostly instrumental guitar with some synth or keyboard, I think, that I think just aches with the loneliness and anger of that movie. And sure enough, it's just towards the end of that soundtrack that's been primarily instrumental. You finally hear some voices, some human voices on it that I think is just in sync with the slightly hopeful note on which that movie ends. I honestly still feel kind of emotional when I listen to it, but it's great score.
I cared for that quite a bit too. My number 2 is Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's official or original soundtrack to...
Lord knows I've held on to way too much hate in my life. But all we have is now. All we have is now. 'Cause 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 'cause
Waves from Trey Edward Schultz. This is one of my favorite mixtapes of sound I've heard in the decade, not just in the year. And there's not much I can say. Watch Waves. You will want to listen to the soundtrack following that.
Yeah, I do want to watch it again and just concentrate on the sound to kind of see like where that original score blends in with the music, because it is kind of subtle, but like you also notice it. You're like, that's not Kanye West. There's some kind of rumble underneath that's really kind of unsettling.
Or the way that they get into Animal Collective is or come out of it. There's these little tinges that they do, but then the mix of it of selecting those songs and putting them in those moments to provide the undercurrent of propulsion to a film that needs propulsion because of its segmentation and bicameralness is excellent. Anyways, your number one.
My favorite score of the year is in...
Est-ce que xam nga ni da nga war a marié wu dans 10 jours ak Omar ci kanamu yàlla.
Mariam man dama bëgg Souleymane.
3 mois fay ñu ko xam naa ne 4e mois fi ñu xala leen ak bu mag la.
Sànq ba léegi maa lay gis lan la. Bàyyi ma guddi rek. Bàyyi ma guddi maa ngi dem.
Atlantics, a film by Mati Diop, and the music is by an artist named Fatima Al-Qadiri. It's an electronic score, and we'll talk more about the plot of that movie later, but the ocean itself figures largely into the construction in the form of that movie. And there's,
the fire also had a dope sound.
Oh yeah. It has just a hypnotic, mesmerizing quality that I think is very much evocative of the rhythm of the ocean that movie keeps returning to, and very listenable even on its own outside of the movie.
I would agree. My favorite soundtrack of the year is not an original soundtrack, but it is an awesome one. It is Climax's assembly of songs and the music and sound that underrides them. In the film that you just mentioned, Atlantics, one of the music supervisors of my pick is one of the music supervisors in your film. So there's some very good work being done sound-wise by Steve Boyer. It's also in conjunction with Pascal Mayer, and when certain songs play, I have flashes of the images that we see in Climax, and I couldn't imagine it any other way. I love the score, I love the film, and I loved making these picks. What is your number 4, Michael?
My number 4 film of the year is...
那倒觉得没什么不好的，咱们好好过日子。
最后一个，走！
咱们这种人迟早会被干掉的。
Ash's Purest White, Chinese film by the filmmaker Xia Zhangke. It is a gangster movie. It is about a woman who is the girlfriend to a gangster in a small mining town who is living more or less well until one fateful night she takes the fall for a crime that puts her in jail for, I want to say at least 5 years. She takes the fall for this gangster she is dating, and it goes on to be the story of her relationship with this man at the same time that it kind of charts the change in China over this same period of time. This was this has footage from over like a 15-year period or something like that. It's not Boyhood. You're not watching a boy go from the age of 4 to 18 where you see some radical physical transformation, but he does use all these different film stocks and switching from film to digital, etc., to kind of double down on this idea of the way the world is changing as this woman is sort of navigating the next chapter in her life. I think it's just really thrilling as a genre piece. It is a gangster movie. I think it has my scene of the year, which is when she stands up for her boyfriend and does something that is what puts her in jail. But it's also, I think, partly about male ego and how hard it is for him to come back to her and the life he knew before that night. And along the way, she, on multiple occasions, is conning men as she tries to work her way back to this gangster boyfriend who she's trying to track down. And for a gangster who spoke so highly of loyalty and what that means to gangsters, she is, miles and miles away from him in terms of how loyal she is to him. I think it's an interesting relationship story, as an interesting portrait of China over these years, and it's available now.
I would agree.
For rental.
It's interesting. It's definitely good. I had a complicated experience with it, but I think it's fascinating and absolutely worth interacting with.
Yeah. It was on K. Austin Collins' list, I think, who paired this with The Irishman for his favorite pick of the year. Do you think there's connections there beyond it being gangster movies, or not so much?
Yeah. Something about how the world is changing. I would personally say that I saw Ashes Pierced White a little bit more about a Chinese citizen's relationship to the changing country and not really knowing where they're at, whereas The Irishman is a little bit more about the youth changing what's acceptable based on what they saw in the past. So it's a little bit different, but I definitely see the symmetry there. My number 4 is a film that we might be talking about a little bit more, but might as well dig into it right now, and that is...
Hello. There you are. You can't speak. You can't move. But this opens you up to the influence. And it breaks down your defenses. Trust me. All right?
Ari Aster's Midsommar, starring Florence Pugh and Jack Rayner and Chidi from The Good Place, and oh boy, do I love this gosh darn movie. This came out in July. I gave it a perfect 5 then. I had a chance to rewatch it in theaters with the director's cut a few months later. Gave it another perfect 5. This is my personal favorite film from Ari Aster. I totally get people preferring Hereditary. Hereditary didn't even crack my top 10. This is, quite a...
That's not right.
Quite a step
I think
up.
it was on your top 10.
It was not.
That can't be right.
It is right.
I'm going to check your own favorites.
You feel welcome to. This is... and it's not specifically because of the filmmaking or the subject matter. It's simply the way that the narrative is told and the ability and the sheer skill that Florence Pugh elicits in this narrative of having a complete emotional breakdown and also playing certain scenes very coyly. very cleverly. You know, in retrospect, essentially everything changes after she takes mushrooms and looks in the mirror at herself in a dark room. But when you just walk out of the movie, you don't quite think about it like that. But the more distance I get, the more I appreciate the tiny little bits, as well as having a chance to watch it at home digitally, see a rune on the wall, look in a rune book at exactly what that is, and then read into that a little bit more. This is just a gift that keeps on giving, and I absolutely love it. I get why other people don't, but those people are wrong, as we went over at the beginning of this episode, because this is the officially correct list.
Yeah, I remain sort of two minds about Midsommar. I gave it a really high rating. I think I gave it a 4.5 out of 5.
Not high enough.
I do really like this movie in a way. I described it in my review as a nerve-shredding nightmare of sunny psychedelia, and it still feels like a right description just based on how I experienced it. I definitely prefer Hereditary. The problem I think I still have with that is that it feels to me like he's maybe just taking a little bit of satisfaction in these grueling things he's putting the characters through. I think about that opening sequence where the camera's, floating throughout Florence Pugh's character's house, and showing us, how this girl has killed herself and her parents, and how that doesn't feel terribly empathetic to me. I don't know. I still struggle at the same time that it's so kind of formally impressive.
So I would agree that there's something there where in that scene, Florence isn't present. There is no emotional focus. It's a neutral presentation of death. And then we spend time with the person who's directly affected by that, outside of a neutral firefighters, paramedics doing their jobs. We see what it's like for this sister and this daughter to have lost these people. To me, that's why it's good. I don't want you to have the same bias when the character's not present that you do when the character is at some level of filmmaking. And not in all stories, but in this story, I really liked it because of how messed up we get and entangled in what's actually happening.
But to me, it's shot with the same kind of formal virtuosity, or if that's not a word, virtuosity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's still shot in the same way that the rest of the movie is. I don't think the form tells me that this is a neutral look at death versus. I mean, it is like this kind of dazzling tracking shot through the house, which is like, wow, look at what has happened. Versus, I don't know, had it just been like a shot of the bodies or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to tell him how to make his movie. I can just say that felt to me like it was kind of impressed by the situation somehow.
Okay. I definitely have a transference from the first group of dead bodies to the last group of dead bodies. There's an extreme emotional change for me when I view the film, and to me it's informed by the character building and the narrative, but it's also the way that the camera shows me the deaths in there, and the way that we hear the shrieking, and that there's just something very coy, but I can't say that I don't see it. I see a major difference between the beginning deaths and the end deaths in presentation, but I think that they're entirely having a conversation, and I think that the deaths in the middle, both voluntary and involuntary, just breathe life into the debate of the film and the value of human life and all sorts of questions. And I love that Ari Aster makes a movie like this where we can even fight about death scenes.
Yeah. The line from Manohla Dargis's review that I have not been able to shake ever since I read it was that in this film he's demonstrating virtuosity without vision, and there is this sense to me that it is formally accomplished but maybe a little empty form. I don't know, we're at an impasse, aren't we?
I would disagree, and I would say that whatever you're reading into there might be an attribute of the character.
All right. That's Midsummer from Ari Aster.
An excellent movie. And now we're on to our favorite actors of the year. We'll start with the supporting actors and actresses. Why don't you lead us, Michael? Who you got?
My favorite supporting actors of the year were Joe Pesci and Al Pacino in The Irishman.
Cheater.
I kind of have a tie between them.
Cheater.
Joe Pesci is, the supporting player everyone adores, rightfully. He's incredible. I couldn't really decide whether Al Pacino is a lead versus a supporting character here. It really feels to me like De Niro is the lead, and it's about how he's relating to these different people. I still absolutely adore Joe Pesci's performance, but there have been little like snippets and images that I've seen just, while perusing various film sites and whatnot ever since seeing The Irishman that keep reminding me of how much fun I had watching Al Pacino. Like there's a shot of him at that banquet dinner where he's eating his steak and looking down at Tony Pro with this look of like contempt. And just in that look, it's like hilarious and, kind of awful at the same time. Not awful. I think it's just actually hilarious. There's him flipping out at his staff, yelling at Tony Pro for wearing shorts to a meeting. I had so much fun watching him.
But there's also the quiet moment where he checks on De Niro before they go to bed.
Yeah. And I think he has the line of the year when he says, "I heard you paint houses," which I think should have been the name of this movie.
I do too.
That way more than The Irishman. But together, they are just the definition of supporting players in, telling us more about Robert De Niro's character.
Line of the year? Ray Liotta might have a little bit of quibble there.
What's his?
Start from a place of unreasonable.
Oh, that's pretty good too.
Both of them are big time Al Pacino acting in those moments.
Oh yeah, love it.
No, that's a great selection. All right, so my favorite supporting actor this year is Joe Pesci. We can move on to your favorite supporting actress.
This is so great. I love it when we move quick. My favorite supporting actress is Rebecca Ferguson in the movie Dr. Sleep, which I did not love, but I had a
we have
decent enough
two
time
actress selections from Stephen King films.
What's the other Stephen King film?
It Too.
Oh yeah, hadn't even thought about that. Weird. That I don't even like him very much. He
I know you don't.
Wiggling his way in here.
Well, you had a complaint about Jessica Chastain, to be clear.
It's true. Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat in Dr. Sleep. A ridiculous name for a character, but this is a ridiculously good performance. She is deliciously evil. I love the scene where like she's blown back in a grocery store when she opens up a refrigerated case, and the look of just astonishment by the power of this girl whose soul she wants to eat is just so convincing. I just had a blast watching her. She's just so evil. I love it. It's great. Rebecca Ferguson. I haven't had that much more fun watching an actress this year.
She is fantastic, and that is one of the funnest performances. Wholly. My favorite supporting actress is a extremely well-known up-and-coming actress by the name of Joanna Ribeiro. She is in Don Quixote, or rather The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. She's in both the original film that we see flashbacks to, or flashbacks to the moments when they're shooting it, and then she is in the more psychedelic, weird reality latter episode, and encounters Adam Driver in a cave. She has a lot of different timelines, or artifices to her character. She expressed such great comedic range and ability, completely transferred herself to look like she was a 17-year-old with braces and was a young waitress, into looking like a beautiful princess, and to looking like she was beautiful, but kind of a rundown wife. There's just so many layers to the performance that she gets to give. I was astounded when I saw it in theaters. I was astounded when I rewatched the film last night. I really think that she's going to go places. And Joanna Ribeiro is my selection for Best Supporting Actress of the Year.
I like it. We're on to Best Actors of the Year.
On to Best Actor and Best Actress. Oh boy, we're getting to crunch time.
Here we are.
Show's almost over.
My favorite actor, or favorite performance, rather, by an actor in a film this year was by Antonio Banderas in Pain and Glory from Pedro Almodovar.
You said the laundromat wrong. You want to try that again?
Oh, yeah. Don't even remind me that he also did that this year. Let's focus on Pain and Glory right now. I'm going to try to block that
Michael's
out.
closing his eyes and just meditating.
Yeah. I think maybe my favorite moment with him in this movie is when this filmmaker he plays is visited by a former lover. And
powerful.
Yeah, he doesn't start crying as he's catching up with his former lover, but his eyes kind of well up. And I just haven't felt like an actor imply so much emotion felt without actually showing it quite like that recently. It just felt so real and just full and rich, and I just wanted to give him a big hug. And then he has a kiss with this former lover, which I just think is so full of longing and that sense of what could have been. And the performance, I think, is just terrific.
The
Antonio
elevator
Banderas.
scene as well.
The which one?
The elevator scene.
Oh, yeah.
Well, on that happy note, my favorite actor is from a film that we just talked about last episode, Mads Mikkelsen in Arctic. The ability to use his body to tell the story and to allow his body to be shot in such a way that the story can be told is masterful. We're talking about a first-time director working with a masterful actor who has had bad roles or has had good performances in bad movies, I'll say. And allowing himself to be the entire subject of what is essentially a one-man survival film that is him against nature and then him in pursuit of help. I don't want to give too much away. It is a magnetic performance that I have not seen the equal to. There's a lot of great performances from Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt and Adam Driver that I love, that are these great performances filled with dialogue, but very rarely do we get a performance from an actor that is essentially a silent performance, that is a man doing work to stay alive. And this even outweighed, I forget the name of the actor in A Hidden Life, but it outweighed that, and it is very similar in the nature of a man against something bigger. And when I give credit to the film, before the director, I have to give credit to that actor, and that movie doesn't work with, I can't think of anybody else that it would work with. It's like imagining All Is Lost without Robert Redford. I just can't do it.
Yeah, you mentioned Leonardo DiCaprio, and I was thinking about him in The Revenant, another kind of outdoor survival movie in a way, and how, just big that performance is.
Yes.
He's groaning and crawling and moaning, and I do like that performance, I think, but there is something about how just difficult I have to think the production of Arctic was. But Mads Mikkelsen is like relatively composed. He's not having a good time, don't get me wrong, but he does seem to have like himself together in a way that I can only imagine like has to have been so difficult if you're like just, ridiculously cold and miserable, and yet he seems to remain level-headed. Like, that's kind of insane.
It's the same. To me, it's not the same. It's very similar to the man that we saw in Valhalla Rising. It is a full body performance where your speech is done with your actions, and he's so powerful at that. So powerful. I love it. Who's your favorite actress?
My favorite actress of the year.
Sorry, who's your most empirically correct actress, because we are not wrong.
Scientifically proven.
Uh-huh.
Is Zhao Tao in Ash is Purest White.
9 out of 10 dentists agree.
I could just as easily have picked Honor Swinburne in The Souvenir.
And I thought you would have.
Who was my pick at the mid-year point. I just wanted to change it up because I remember wrestling at the mid-year point between them, and I was still wrestling with them now, so I just felt like
you gotta give an even flip. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's always something a little hard for me to pay attention to foreign language performances in the same way because, I just don't understand pitch as much and that kind of thing. Voice is huge in a performance.
And we're also looking down.
Yeah, exactly.
At the subtitles.
Yeah. But yeah, I keep thinking about these episodes in the film where she's conning different men and she's kind of wielding these glances to take advantage of them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, she's deliberately looking, a little in need of help or something like that. Versus the glance she gives to a woman who says this former lover of hers is now seeing someone else, and she stares her down and says, I want him to tell me myself. I just think those are some of the most powerful looks I've seen an actress give.
That was a dope scene, though.
Yeah, it's great. Or the confidence during the kind of centerpiece where this crime takes place that sends her to jail. Great performance.
My favorite actress of the year is very similar to all those hemmings and hawings I just made for Mads Mikkelsen. My favorite actress here is Sofia Boutella in Gaspar Noé's Climax. Once again, this is a full-bodied performance. She does talk quite a bit more, but the nature of her performance is one of dance. It is one of physicality. It is different than Mads because she's not anchoring herself against the nature of reality. She's attempting to embrace the altered change of reality with an entire dance troupe and changing scenery of songs and a very complex arrangement of mood, incredible camera choreography. This is, when I think about the decade, not just this year, I'm going to have thoughts of Sophia doing the various dancing she does here. And I never really cared for her as an actress before this, to be honest. So this is a big turnaround for me. She was in one of Margot Robbie's production company's action films, Hotel something, Artemis maybe. It was just a B action film, and she was one of the main characters, and I was really disappointed, and I thought I didn't like her as a performer. But this changed me, and then she also had a brief performance in an Amazon Prime show, Modern Love, I think it's called. And that really, really won me over. She was opposite of a fella who I don't remember the name of, who was in 10 Cloverfield Lane. And it is really special. So if you're interested, check out Climax or check out that one single episode on Prime Video streaming for free of Modern Love, because she really has something.
She was in Atomic Blonde, correct?
I believe so.
I didn't see that film. But
I did not like that movie.
Oh, really?
I did not like it.
I think it looks fun. Still want to see it at some point.
James McAvoy has a fun performance. Charlize Theron does kill some people. I would stick with Mad Max Fury Road if I was you, because I can predict how that's going to go. But on to number 3. What is your third favorite feature film of the year?
Really getting into the big ones here.
We're telling people the 9 out of 10 dentist-approved version of reality.
My third favorite movie of the year is...
I know I wasn't a good dad. I know that. I was just trying to protect all yous.
From what?
You didn't see what I see, what I've been through.
A friend of ours is having a little trouble. Friend at the top.
Hiya, Frank. This is Jimmy Hoffa.
Glad to meet you.
Big business and the government is on the attack.
You want to be a part of this fight? A part of this history?
Whatever you need me to do, I'm available.
Martin Scorsese's The Irishman.
Ooh, I like it.
You like this movie, okay?
I do. It's my number 7.
Yeah, I didn't have this on my list of the most anticipated movies of the year. I just thought...
Well, I think then we didn't know if it was even going to come out this year.
Yeah, I
think it was like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where we just didn't even know if it was going to come out this year, like Killing the Barbarians. We still don't know.
But I absolutely went for it. I really responded to the elegiac, mournful mood of it. The performances across the board, I think all the acting is exceptional. And this idea that all these gangsters whose fates we know as soon as we meet them are going to wind up killing each other or in prison, when all they really want are really simple pleasures. Things like the ice cream sundae that Al Pacino loves so much, or like Robert De Niro just wanting to connect with his daughter, or Joe Pesci's character really wanting to connect with Robert De Niro's daughter.
Or Joe Pesci's character really wanting to dip bread into wine.
Absolutely. I think, we talked about that a little bit when we discussed The Irishman. I kind of think food is an interesting part of this movie, and how sort of pointless so much of their violence is. I was just completely enmeshed with the mob here, and like any Scorsese movie, you like seeing the mechanics of this organization, but the very real humans within it. I think regret is, a dominant theme, and I still kind of wrestled with that with Robert De Niro's character. The extent to which he does regret certain things, I think, is really interesting, and it's just immaculately crafted. There are so many scenes individually that I just want to rewatch, like Al Pacino talking about how you rush a gunman but not a guy with a knife, or Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci's character at a gas station meeting for the first time. I don't know, there's just dozens and dozens of moments that feel really, really rich with meaning, but are really easy to watch. It's a long movie, but easy viewing.
All the moments are smooth.
Yep.
All right. My number 3 is, once again, not a feature film.
Go on.
My number 3 is...
I jumped. Nothing happened the way I imagined.
Let me, Miss Ozarova.
I live here?
We traveled into another dimension. Into other versions of ourselves. Do you understand what we're on the edge of here? It's godlike, Prairie.
The OA Part 2, in conjunction with...
That's what we do, though, isn't it? We take what hurts and we turn it into a big gag, and we're singing and we're dancing, and the audience, they're yucking it up, they're laughing so hard. They don't realize that all they're laughing at is a person in agony, a person who's peeled off his own skin.
Where's that smile, Bobby?
The only thing I want to do is be with you. I love you.
Fosse Verdon, Episode 1.
I'm confused.
So the OA, as anyone that knows what that is also knows, was canceled this year after making one of the highest single season rated seasons of television ever, and one of the greatest cinematic experiences in long form storytelling I've ever had. Britt Marling's by far my MVP. She produced, wrote, I believe assistant directed, acted. She basically did anything you could do to make art in this visual medium on this project, and the way that the show ended season 2 was one that blew every single individual's mind that watched the show, and all anyone wants is to see Part 3. Consider this my plea at number 3 to get the OA, Part 3. Additionally, Fosse Verdon, Michelle Williams won a Best Actress role for this. Sam Rockwell did not win a Best Actor award, but was nominated and deserves attention. Margaret Qualley's in here. This is prestige limited series at its best. I would encourage anyone with a Hulu subscription to turn it on and at least watch the pilot. That'll tell you right away whether or not this is for you. And if you don't like it, just turn on Netflix and watch the OA Part 2.
Both ones I still need to catch up with.
And I doubt you will, because they're TV. You don't play around in the lens format
will
like
you
I
allow
do.
me to just do the first episode, or am I even going to be able to do that? Will I just be so hooked?
Oh, you won't be hooked. You don't like TV.
All right, we'll see.
Michael's going to get back to us next episode and tell us how he liked Fosse Verdon Part 1. Tune into that. All right, we have our top 3 directorial debuts in descending order. What's your number 3 directorial debut, Michael?
It is...
Welcome to family. You were on holiday?
Yeah, me and my friend, a bunch of friends together in a villa.
Holiday by the filmmaker Isabella Eckloff. It is about a young woman named Sasha, played by Victoria Carmen Son, as she is vacationing with her small-time drug lord boyfriend and his crew in the Turkish Riviera when she starts to take up an interest in someone else, not her boyfriend and not someone in the crew. This is a very, very tough watch. To the extent that it has been talked about this year, it's been talked about for the abuse that this young woman endures at the hand of her gangster boyfriend.
Which we don't even see in the American version of the film.
Right, there have been different edits of this on different platforms.
This is the first film since Irreversible that's been talked about in contention for the most painful rape scene that you'll see since Irreversible. I mean, The Nightingale had a brief conversation, but I don't think that you can compare what happens in The Nightingale to Irreversible, but my understanding is that Holiday is very painful.
Yeah, it is more explicit, I think, than both. It is fake. Let's be very clear about that. This is a fake scene. There is a prosthetic involved.
Okay.
And whatnot. But yeah, there is one key scene of sexual violence.
So is Irreversible. To be clear.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to cover our bases here. Yes, everyone is okay. Maybe deeply, deeply troubled, even by having participated in it. I cannot imagine, like, to be abundantly clear, like, it is extraordinarily difficult to watch, let alone imagine acting, no matter how it's done. But I think the direction is very distanced from
It's
the
directed
violence.
by a woman, correct?
It is.
Yeah.
I think there's this very sort of clinical approach where the camera, there are very few close-ups. It's always literally kind of distant from the characters. And I don't doubt that someone more familiar with, like, the psychology of the abuse could maybe take this movie to task for getting certain things right or wrong. But I think this movie, with its form, is telling us something about the consequences on this woman's headspace by having gotten wrapped up in this horrifically violent relationship with the man, and what happens when she kind of sees a way out of it. It's got this really interesting look because it's very colorful, which you wouldn't expect from a movie that I'm describing as so harrowing. But these colors really pop as they're going around this kind of resort town that's on it's on a beach. And I just am kind of fascinated with the commitment to this woman's perspective. I think, movies don't want to, often for fine reasons, don't want us to spend so much time with someone that's going through something so awful. But I think there's also something kind of empathetic because it's not unreal. I don't know. It's a tough watch, but it has stuck with me for sure.
Whenever it comes up, I believe the film is called Revenge, which is kind of a similar idea, but I gather Revenge is a little bit more violent and enjoyable in the sense of getting revenge than Holiday.
There is no revenge involved. Absolutely, definitely not.
That is not what I wanted to hear, but that's fine.
I think that is part of the conversation, is that you think it might go that way, and it goes in a very different direction that's much more troubling.
It's more complex. That's still interesting.
And, I could be taken down by someone who says this is not at all how abused women usually act. That's entirely possible. I just felt convinced by the form that something about this character felt right.
My number 3 film of the year is a film that I haven't seen pop up on, or number 3 directorial debut of the year is not something I've seen pop up on any conversations really, and that is.
How long have you been in prison?
12 years.
And how long from the thought of the crime to the actual crime?
Split second.
Is The Mustang. I don't know how to pronounce her name correctly, so I'll just make an attempt here. First-time director Laura de Clermont-Tonnerre, and she has Matthias Schoenaerts, Bruce Dern, Jason Mitchell, Connie Britton, Gideon Adlin, Josh Stewart, and Thomas Smittle in her first-time film. This is a film about a man who has a complex background. He's in prison for a reason, and he has an opportunity to participate in a program with breaking horses, and later selling them to help earn profit for the jail. And it's a really good program that there's actually a lot of data for how great it is that they're pulling from a lot of jails. And this is just one of those middle of the year movies that I went into thinking this is another Lean on Pete, the writer type of thing. I'm going to get bored. I'm not going to care for it. And I was completely enraptured in Matthias Schoenaerts' performance, the lens and the way that the jail is portrayed, some weather events that the director conveys are just so well and meticulously sewed together in editing, and it's just a different version of prison than I've ever seen. And when I see a first-time director show me something I haven't seen before with the camera, I'm always excited, and the collaboration with those performers and her just cemented it into one of my most memorable experiences. Even though it's a top 50 film for me, this is one of those top 50 films that it was never going to make number 10, but I could see it in my top 20. And it's such a shame that no one's talking about it.
I don't know why it's so tempting to doubt horse movies.
Uh-huh.
They're getting a bad rap, apparently. They are fabulous creatures,
Yeah.
but we're always like,
We saw the Black Stallion. There's nothing else to it. We saw Disney's Spirit. There's no more.
One I have not seen, I know Manohla Dargis in the New York Times was a big fan of that one. Wrote something like, "It shouldn't work, and yet it does."
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was. I like that review a bit.
Your number 2.
My number 2 is a film called.
Do you know what happened?
I never would have left you like that.
We both know that those charges are bullshit.
Bullshit! Nobody made me get drunk. Nobody made me
So
go.
what? Who gives a shit what you did?
He thinks this is not normal. I know things like this happen to someone every day. I don't want help. I just want to know what happened.
Cher by a filmmaker named Pippa Bianco.
Which I did not expect this.
So I have cheated slightly with my top debuts because you would expect An Elephant Sitting Still to be on this list since it made my top 10. But by excluding it here, since it is on my top 10, I got to squeak in one more. You know, I do those kinds of things.
Okay. I still am surprised that this movie is on this list compared to some of the other things that we've seen directorial debuts from. So, I mean, specifically my number 2, but we'll get there in a moment. Go ahead.
We'll get there. This is about a high school girl who gets passed out drunk in a party, wakes up with no memory of what happened, and discovers in the next day or two that a video of her getting taken advantage of by a boy or two at this party has gotten viral at her school. It's a little unclear in the video who exactly these boy or boys were. And it's the story of her trying to kind of unravel what exactly happened. Not that it's a mystery, but that is withheld from us for most of the movie's runtime.
Yeah, to me it's more about how she feels about it is what the film is about.
100%. It very quickly comes to the attention of faculty and parents and even local news that she has been assaulted. And it's very much about how awful that is for someone who's already been through something terrible when it becomes public. And the kind of pressure and stigma that comes about from that.
And the expectation that others have for her choices.
Yeah. And I think this has very much been probably written off as a Lifetime movie. And I just think that is such a discredit to the direction and the lead performance. The actress's name is Rihanna Barretto, which I think is a terrific performance. She was really close to being on my pick for A Star Is Born this year. I just think she suggests so much with the physicality of her performance about what this girl is going through. And the direction is pretty restrained. I think it could have been so didactic and kind of talky or condescending, right? And being a lesson in sexual violence and social media. It is about those things, but I think it's a better movie than it sounds. Yeah, I think it's an impressive debut about a worthwhile subject at the risk of sounding capital I important.
It is a worthy subject. I don't think that it's formally something that spoke to me, is maybe where I'd have a little bit of difficulty there. My number 2.
You two stick together. I always come back to the old house. What if it's empty? What if we just peeked inside? We could throw parties. You could put on one of your plays. We could yell. It is this house. Our old house. That's not your old house, and that's not your neighborhood.
Hey, if you're going to San Francisco.
Is The Last Black Man in San Francisco from Joe Talbot, first-time feature film director. His film stars Jimmy Fails, Danny Glover, and Jonathan Majors, who I talked about earlier. And this movie was striking. It did informal things with a great formal presentation. The way that it would do that weird reverse or steady shot when the boys were skateboarding together. The way that it would shoot the interiors of the home. I just think about a lot of striking imagery, and then the fact that he also co-wrote the screenplay, and the moments in this film that are some of my favorite dialogue moments on the year the way that they present the play upstairs. This is a really special filmmaker. I'd put him in the same conversation as Corey Finley, who we put a lot of hoopla on 2 years ago now. Is that right? When Thoroughbreds came out?
Yeah.
Maybe they pushed it back to January so it could get 2018 attention. Can't recall, but that he seems very strikingly similar into someone who can kind of create a stage play look with real life set pieces, and use the form to strike an image that feels different. You know, it's what's the movie with Armie Hammer and Lakeith Stanfield and Tessa Thompson?
Sorry to bother you.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. You know, there's a weird to the movie. You know, it's not quite reality, but it certainly is also someone's reality. And the way that that's visually conveyed for a first-time filmmaker, it's exciting. I'm ready for more.
Yeah. I feel like I maybe just need to give it another go. Like I said previously, I did not respond to it in a big way, and yet every time I think about it, I kind of think about the ways in which it does work. You know, it kind of has that storybook look, and I think that makes so much sense since it's a story about this guy who's kind of telling himself and his friend a story about this house. That's why it's so full of meaning to him, and Jonathan Majors ends up literally telling a story in a play. I think that all really kind of fits together. I think I just I don't know, just the lack of grit in some way just felt kind of missing to me, and some of the conversation felt just not quite as thick as I was hoping, but I should revisit it, no doubt.
I agree, you should. What is your number one directorial debut on the year?
That is...
Ada xale góor yi dem nañ. Lan? Xale góor yi dem nañ géej. Jël nañu gaal. Souleymane Cheikh ñoom ñëpp dem nañ.
Atlantics by Mati Diop. I thought this might make your list. I guess it's just on mine.
I definitely thought about it. All three of these, though, are higher on my actual list as well. So,
yeah, I think this is one very likely to just jump into my top 10 on rewatch. It kind of took me by surprise when I first watched it.
I think it took us both by surprise.
Because of where it goes. But this is set in Dakar, Senegal. It's about a young girl who is arranged to be married to one boy but is in love with another. The boy she is in love with is a construction worker working on a high-rise building and hasn't been paid for his work in months, and with the hope of with more opportunities for himself, he leaves Dakar. He sets sail on the ocean and hopes to find more opportunities for himself. I'll just kind of end the plot discussion there without giving too much away, but this is an atmospheric and haunting kind of film. The score plays a big part in that. I think the lead performance is very good, but it is so much more about mood that makes it just so transfixing. It did feel to me like a movie that might work in a double bill with Transit.
I would agree.
Because of the themes of migration and ghosts. I'll not say more than that, but Georg, as I described in Transit, takes up the identity of a dead writer in Transit, and something similar occurs in Atlantics that I still haven't quite shaken. And yeah, I don't know. It's still kind of haunts me when I think about it. It is Atlantics. It's streaming on Netflix by Mati Diop.
It is, and it's excellent. My number one directorial debut of the year is...
Can you squeeze? Like this, squeeze. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Joe Penna's Arctic.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. I'm nothing if not consistent. So, since we've already talked about that plenty, what is your number 2 film of the year, Michael?
My number 2 film of the year is...
I'm Rick Dalton. It's my pleasure, Mr. Schwartz.
Call me Marvin. Put it there. That your son?
No, it's my stunt double, Cliff Booth.
Last night, we watched a Rick Dalton double feature. All the shooting. I love that stuff, you know, the killing.
A lot of killing.
Anybody order fried sauerkraut? Damn you Nazi bastards!
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood from Quentin Tarantino. This was not even close to being on my most anticipated films of the year. The trailer dropped. I was still not very interested in this movie, and I totally went for it. I've never been just a diehard Tarantino lover. I don't know, kind of hit and miss, I guess I could say. Always, impressed by his control of the craft, no doubt. But sometimes they leave me feeling a little queasy. I don't think that's unusual at all. But I very much went for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie. DiCaprio plays a TV actor primarily working on westerns in 1969 LA. This is very much an ode to classic Hollywood in its final hours. We knew in advance that this movie was about the Manson murders. I just did not expect something... it's weird for me to use the word nostalgic, which is a word that has been very much associated with this movie, because I didn't live with this period. I don't think I even had much of an interest in watching the kinds of things that DiCaprio's character worked on. Like, this is an area of Hollywood that I didn't live through.
Agreed.
But it is very much about this period of Hollywood, this cycle of Hollywood coming to a very violent end, and kind of what could have been, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there are things about the era that are kind of troubling and that are okay to leave behind, there's just always something a little wistful about the cycles of Hollywood and
the good times that we'd had.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the movie has an admiration for DiCaprio's obsession with his craft. My favorite scene, or actually I have a couple scenes that I particularly love, but one is when he's working on this Western called Lancer. He's the bad guy, and he jacks up his first take at it, goes back to his trailer, throws the fit, and then returns, and is clearly so determined to get it right. And he's the kind of, actor that would just kind of shrug off, because it's a TV Western,
mm-hmm.
but nothing is more important to him than giving it everything he can possibly give. And it's about the people who don't make it from one cycle to the next, for different reasons. And I'm still troubled by the ending to some extent.
I'm not.
I don't think I need to avoid spoilers here, because I think most people have seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
It's been out for half a year.
I think
it's out on
safe.
Blu-ray now. It's safe.
I think what helps me watch the scene where these, girls are getting torched and whatnot. Some people, I think, feel like it's retreading what Tarantino has already done. For me, it kind of helps that it's an allusion to his own filmography because it calls attention to this violence as cinema, as artifice. It feels a little less real and more like wishful thinking just about what could have been for these other people. I don't know. Even that feels a little queasy as I say it.
Well,
I'm still wrestling with it, but
I don't have it in front of me, but it's essentially what Greta said, introducing him for that Best Director award that I told you about previously off the air. Disagree all you want about what Tarantino's movies are, whether or not you like them, but in his movies, we get to watch slave owners get murdered. We get to watch Hitler killed. We get to watch the Manson murderers burned alive and beaten to death. We get to have an imaginary world that is different and less macabre. And I like those moments. I get all the other criticism, but to me, the first thing you have to say is that what he's trying to do is specifically what he's trying to do, and that is to save Sharon Tate and kill the murderers. That is to save as many humans as possible at the end of Inglourious Bastards and kill Hitler. That is to free these slaves and kill Leonardo DiCaprio. And I like that. I like killing the villains. I like alternate history where we go back and there's someone we don't like who committed war crimes or crimes against humanity, and we fucking kill them. And I think that you can get really heady and argue a bunch of stuff, but if at the bottom you're not agreeing that Tarantino just wants to live in a world where these bad things didn't happen and his movies try to accomplish that, you're not even playing the same conversation.
Right. Yeah, I am not feeling sorry for the Manson murderers in any way. There's just always the glee with which he goes at it. That is always just not how I would do it. Let me put it that way. It is more committed. It is more intense than I can even imagine construing. And yeah, I don't know. It is
violence
kind of
can be art.
Yeah, I don't know. I still enjoy this film a great deal, even if I haven't totally worked out all of that.
We're fighting. It's your number 2. It's not even on my list.
Right.
Let's fight about it.
Yeah. It's, it has to do with...
I want to watch it again, though. Yeah.
Me too. It has to do with just the knowledge that these people didn't make it to the next decade and how precious various moments then become. Whether it's Brad Pitt driving back to his trailer with his dog or Margot Robbie at the movie, or one of my favorite scenes where you're just watching all of the marquees come on at night. That is such a great sequence, like the Cinerama and, little motels and that kinds of thing. It's just about like taking the time to look at those things, while you can. It's one of my favorite Tarantinos for sure.
It could be in my top 10. I haven't rewatched it enough, and I haven't had enough time. It's a movie that I still need more time with. I didn't like it my first watch. The second time I came way up on it. I just need more time. My number 2 is Trey Edward Schultz's
You pushed him!
Lord knows I've held on to way too much hate in my life. But all we have is now. All we have is now.
Waves. I loved It Comes at Night. I really enjoyed Krisha. Didn't see it the year it came out. I saw Waves the year it came out. And I saw it in a theater. And I had the best time in a theater. I'd already seen Climax not in a theater when I first saw it. So for me, this one was one of the most special first-time viewings in that dark theater. I kind of had to put on a cocoon. I was wearing a sweater, and I had to put my hood up at one point. Then I tightened it, and I just kind of fell into my body during the first half. These sequences and their ability to work together but be so different and then call back to each other at the end. Trey is one of my favorite directors, definitely in my top 5 directors this year, and I can't believe how talented he is.
Completely support the pick. Ask me tomorrow and it'll be on there like many other movies. Descending
order, favorite classic film discovery. Things we watched for or on accident for the show, in descending order. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is... Sherlock Jr. by Buster Keaton.
Yes.
From 1924, which I'm almost laughing saying that. We've been so in 2019.
Yeah.
But I love this movie. We did a mini Keaton marathon.
Uh-huh.
And this was one of my favorites of the ones we watched. We watched a couple features, a couple shorts. This one is where Keaton plays a film projectionist who gets framed by his rival for stealing his girlfriend's father's watch. And he's a wannabe detective. He walks back after getting framed to his projection booth, falls asleep, and dreams of himself crossing over into the movie plane below and becoming the more capable detective Sherlock Jr. I just thought this captures all the magic of silent cinema for me. It's funny, it's clever, it's just plain magical in its tricks. I think it's about both kind of that tendency to imitate what we see in the movies. We get that in that final scene where he's mimicking the romantic lead in the movie Playing Below as he's with his lover, and about that desire to kind of want to be in the movies since he literally crosses over into it. I loved it. Sherlock Jr. What's your number 3?
My number 3 was my number 1 halfway through the year. My number 3 is Bob Fosse's.
How do you people really feel about doing it? Isn't that about the dirtiest thing we could do to each other?
He was a comic, a cynic, a satirist, a criminal, a genius.
Lenny, starring Dustin Hoffman as the title character or titular character. Lenny Bruce, the abrasive, acerbic comedian who challenged freedom of speech laws and paved the way for George Carlin to do what George Carlin did. I like almost every single gosh darn thing about this movie, and I would encourage anyone that didn't already listen to the episode and want to watch it, go watch it, listen to the episode where we talk about it and a few other from Fosse, because it is... It's a great little film. What is your number 2?
My number 2 is...
I'm shy.
Lips.
Lips. What is beyond the world?
The New World from Terrence Malick, 2005 film.
Your number 2 is my number 1 Terrence Malick film.
Oh, it is my favorite Terrence Malick film as well. I had never seen The Tree of Life until this year when I watched it for Best of the Decade homework. Enjoyed it a great deal. Kind of no surprise there, but the New World remains my favorite. It's this...
the New World Director's Cut. We'll abbreviate it there.
We both watched the director's cut on the episode on which we discussed it. it feels like a Terrence Malick movie in every way because of how the camera is floating and the editing is, done so poetically. I like the specificity of the narrative.
Mm-hmm. Its historicalness, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's weird to summarize Terrence Malick in like a couple sentences, I guess. But I think, the performances are great from Colin Farrell. I think it has the poetry that we've come to expect from his kind of late period work while also having an arc to it. And it's just that meeting of poetry and prose that I think makes this story of the founding of America very beautiful and romantic at the same time that it's troubling. He doesn't overlook any of that at all. The New World by Terrence Malick. That's my number 2. What is yours?
My number 2 is a film that you and Gabby both strongly loved. My number 2 is Pier Paolo Pasolini's Salo, or The 120 Days of Saddam. This is one of the highest expectations I've had going into a film, living up to that and exceeding it at some level. Previously, this was my number 1 classic film. I just had to think, and I move it down only because the other one that we'll talk about momentarily is so special to me. But so is this film, and I wish I could encourage anyone to watch it. I can't. My number 1 favorite film of the year is going to be a little bit similar, and that I can't really recommend people go watch it with good faith, unless you're a little bit intrigued by the nature of humans' depravity, like I am. But Salo and Pasolini's way of presenting this is truly fascinating, and I would encourage anyone who wants to see it. But if you're like, I don't know, maybe, don't.
Fun movie. Watch it with the family. Cook popcorn.
Watch it with your grandparents. All right, Michael, what's your number 1 classic film discovery this year?
That is
magnificently told against the lavish background of the affluent society of present-day Europe. L'Avventura, unfolding in vividly etched scenes of unprecedented pictorial splendor and sensuality, the lives of a group of unsettled people in a constant, never-ending search for spiritual and physical fulfillment.
L'Avventura from Michelangelo Antonioni.
That's a fantastic film.
1960 film. It is about...
These are all like my favorite films. They
right?
just weren't my own discoveries. Yeah.
2 are from the same episode where we had 3 5-star films each,
yes,
I believe.
But neither of us wanted to put that other one that is acerbic on ours.
No need to extensively recap a movie that came out in 1960. It's about about a group of upper class individuals who go on a boating trip together when one of them mysteriously, inexplicably disappears, and the friend of the disappeared woman starts a relationship up with the man who was dating said disappeared woman. It's about, all the things people describe Antonio as being about: alienation and loneliness and emptiness, and it's just, impeccably directed and formally just next level. It's a great movie.
It's shot on location. It's fantastic. My number 1 classic discovery of the year is the 1962 Sidney Lumet adaptation of Eugene O'Neill's play
Someday, when the Blessed Virgin Mary forgives me and gives me back the faith in her love and pity I used to have in my convent days, and I can pray to her again.
Long Day's Journey into Night, which I watched before we watched Long Day's Journey into Night Chinese 2018, it turns out they have nothing in common. But I do get to say this is my favorite classic accidental discovery of the year. I watched it for some homework for the show, didn't realize I was totally wrong, got to see Katharine Hepburn put on one of the best performances I've ever seen from an actress. I can't say enough great things. If you want to watch peak cinema in the 60s and you don't know where to start and you just want a blind recommendation that you might not get anywhere else, here's my recommendation. Long Day's Journey into Night. It's a Eugene O'Neill play, and it's from the very capable, very masterful director Sidney Lumet. And you get to see a Hepburn while you're at it, so enjoy.
A happy accident. I like it.
It sure was. Your number one, the empirically best, 9 out of 10 dentist approved, number one film of 2019, Michael. What is it?
It's one that has not come up on the episode at all yet, and that is...
Very special, Jenny.
I don't think I am.
Oh, no, you don't think you will.
Very normal, really.
You're not normal at all.
I feel as though I want to not live my whole life in this very privileged part of the world I come from. I want to be really aware about what's going on around me. Sorry.
We can all be sincere, but what's it all for?
The Souvenir by Joanna Hogg, a British filmmaker. I watched this again a couple days ago. No reservations. This is my favorite movie of 2019. It is a semi-autobiographical drama about Joanna Hogg's own experiences as a film student in 1980s Britain when she was struggling to find her voice as an artist and getting swept up in a very toxic relationship with
having a hard time getting money from her mother.
True. Played by Tilda Swinton.
Her mother.
A very solid supporting role. The lead character, Julie, Hogg's stand-in, essentially, is played by Honor Swinton-Byrne, Tilda Swinton's daughter. Remains one of my favorite performances of the year. I love the elliptical flow of it, the static shots that let us just kind of watch this dynamic between Julie and her terrible boyfriend as they hang out in her apartment and restaurants and a gallery. I hated Anthony too much on first viewing to kind of appreciate the performance by Tom Burke. Some of the subtle expressions he has that are so condescending and pretentious. It is wild, but they're really good. I did laugh a couple times watching this. I was like, wow, he is so wildly pretentious. It's incredible. But, you know, this is not to be mistaken for a comedy. I think it is a wrenchingly honest work of self-reflection, and it feels just so private and intimate and generous for sharing with us something so kind of awful. And it's not self-pitying, but it feels very humble. You know, I like these scenes where we're seeing Julie struggle to articulate to her teachers what it is she wants to accomplish with her movies, and how she's stuck in this relationship, maybe partly because he so withholds any kind of praise for her work, that she maybe kind of wants that validation as someone who's still kind of insecure about their work. Mm-hmm. I think it's about it's about what this movie kind of withholds from us about their relationship that makes it so kind of involving. It's kind of fragmented. You're putting the pieces together yourself. That's very kind of satisfying, even though it is so sad. And part 2 is coming hopefully in 2020. I'm not quite sure what the status of that is. I am fascinated and terrified to see where it goes. When you love something, you kind of just want it to like
stop,
let it be.
Be what you are. Let me love you forever.
Yeah, exactly. I wholeheartedly love it. It's my number one. by a good stretch. What is your favorite movie of 2019?
My favorite movie of 2019 internationally came out in 2018, and we've already talked about it a few times, and that is Gaspar Noé's...
Oh, you're so good. Thank you. Thanks. I'm so happy. I couldn't be happier.
Truc qui monte.
Qu'est-ce que t'as? Tu sais garder un secret.
Climax. This is one of the most engaging, most technically proficient, affecting and effecting experiences I've ever had in film. It's one of the juiciest things to discuss in the whole year of film. You could just pick a single scene and dissect it for hours and come out totally different, and then move on to the next 3-minute dance sequence and have totally different interpretations. It opens on its end, which is a murderer dying, and it just never lets up. It's relentless. People catch on fire. Children are electrocuted to death.
Whoa.
It's just a great and hard film. It is a Gaspar Noé film, and I really hope that 2020 has anything close to touching how good this was or how good Waves was, because these are two bangers, and it was hard for me to put Waves under Climax, but I've seen Climax 3 times now, and it only improves for me. Noé to me is what Kubrick is to other people. He's not only masterful technically, he actually has something to say to me about the nature of man and empathy in a way that I appreciate more than Kubrick's tone. I just think there's more happening there, and he's another top 5 director for me working today, and releasing this year. And if you want to watch a banger, turn on Amazon Prime for free, click Climax, and good luck, because like I said previously with Solo, I can't recommend this to anybody, but I just did to you, so good luck.
Best of luck, people. I will watch that opening sequence any day, anytime.
Yeah.
That is one of
the opening sequence where she's crawling around dying in the snow?
No! The dance! Come on!
Oh, that's like 20 minutes into the movie,
well,
okay.
Is it really? I feel like
it's pretty far in.
Why does it feel like the beginning? Maybe that's just when I was most
Because
psyched.
that's when it feels like the beginning. That's why it's such a good movie.
That's right.
It messes with your sense of time.
You get the intro to each dancer on the television first. I forgot about that.
What would you do if you couldn't dance? Suicide.
It's a commitment to their art.
All right. We're about to close it out. Last but not least, top 3 technically beautiful films. This is, as you described earlier, my catch-all.
Oh, yeah.
Let's start with your number 3 catch-all for film.
For me, it's sort of like below-the-line excellence. Those other crew members who I thought excelled at whatever it is they do. My number 3 is Long Day's Journey into Night.
I loved that movie, the 1962 Sidney Lumet, Eugene O'Neill adaptation.
The other one.
Oh, boo.
The other one. 2019. Which has this
we agreed.
55-minute or so long take in the second half of the movie.
One of the most impressive shots I've seen in a cinema all year, for sure.
There's a point where the camera is switched over to a drone, and there's just all kinds of crazy movement to it that just feels so much so dreamlike. It is not the Emmanuel Lubetsky kind of tracking shot.
Wait, the descent was a drone?
I should clarify. I don't know that for sure. There is just a portion of the long take where the camera takes flight.
Where the camera is in the air. I won't say it takes flight. I don't know that it took flight.
That could be.
Because he's on the line sliding in front of it. And I don't know that it's not connected to that line on like an auto track.
That is entirely possible. I have not done my research for how exactly this was pulled off. But for a movie that is just interested in recreating the sensation of a dream, I think it is wildly appropriate and successful. That's my number 3. What is yours?
My number 3 is, my list is very different than yours in that it's just what I think it should be, not a catch-all. My number 3 is Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, because I believe that the technical achievements made with the visual effects, as well as the incredible camera work, the lighting, other than the one scene that I complained about in the episode, it's all next level, and to me, it's technically beautiful, and I can't put anything above it, other than the 2 that I have above it, personally. So, Irishman, it's number 3 against my own will, but there you go. What's your number 2?
We're not done with it yet, but my number 2 is not The Irishman. It is Dark Waters by Todd Haynes for Ed Lachman's cinematography.
It's beautiful.
I could have picked 10 other movies whose cinematography I love just as much, but this movie has not gotten as nearly as much love as it should have gotten. It's flown under the radar, to say the least. But Ed Lachman's cinematography just gives this movie this toxic look that is so perfect for the material. This story of a corporate defense attorney who goes on the offensive against DuPont Chemical for poisoning the water supply in numerous small towns in Virginia, and discovers more. There are just dozens of shots in this movie that I think are so evocative of disease and rot. There's a scene where Mark Ruffalo's character is in a restaurant with a guy who's teaching him a little bit about the chemicals DuPont uses, and there's this yellow light above the bar in the restaurant that just looks so kind of like rotten or something. I don't know. There's just so much texture to this movie that I think has been written off as conventional by people who probably haven't even seen it, because hardly anybody saw this movie.
You and I both said that when we did first impressions, so we can't say that we did the same thing. We were wrong though, and everybody should try it.
You are absolutely right. The trailer
did
makes
it
look
0
familiar.
favors. Yeah.
But it's a good looking.
They should have just done a single take, honestly.
Yeah.
A single 30-second take with Mark Ruffalo having a shaking hand or something. My number 2 is James Gray's Ad Astra, specifically for Hoyte van Hoytema's cinematography, which was otherworldly but also deeply grounded in a humanistic texture. It's, if he makes a movie, I like how it looks. I'll just put it that way. I might not like the movie. There's a few instances of movies he's shot that I don't like, but kind of like Deakins, I can at least like how it looks. And I like how Ad Astra looks, and I love the movie. It's special, and the way that the moon chase scene was shot, it's uncanny, and I think, contrary to most people, that is an achievement, not a flaw.
You went very big. I am going much smaller.
Ultra small.
With costume design in The Irishman. I could rewatch this movie and just watch what all these characters are wearing, from the suits that all these
Joe Pesci's pants, right?
What they're wearing at different ages of their life. The tie clips, those glasses Pesci has.
The hats.
The
shorts.
The fedora he's wearing at the gas station. It plays a literal role in a meeting where Pacino says, "You wear shorts to a meeting like this?" And Tony Pro's wearing that Hawaiian shirt. I just think it's all, so purposefully designed, and the jewelry the women are wearing, and how it sort of indicative of how all these people have different roles in this world of the mob. I just thought was so much fun to look at. It's great costume design in The Irishman.
It is. So that was your number one. Closing it out. My number one, similar to my previous number one, and perhaps another number one, is Climax.
What?
This specifically is for Benoit Debie's cinematography, as well as the choreography that we see from Nina. I can't pronounce her name correctly, but I can certainly make an attempt. Manelli. And the combination of what are both essentially pieces of choreography between the cinematography and the choreography of the dancers is, it is the film. Of course, it's under the direct supervision of Noé, and he really has a keen eye for movement and luridity in the lens, but the twists and the turns of the camera in conjunction with when bodies flip over and begin walking backwards upside down like crabs, or when people catch on fire and begin shrieking, or when someone attempts to kill themselves. There's just a constant movement that I think is the only pace that I liked more that was as fast as Uncut Gems. It's one of those few things that has that pace, and to do the choreography that it does at that pace, that's why it's number one for me, and in so many categories, but specifically number one film of 2019.
I hope you feel good about that, because that concludes our conversation on the year in movies in 2019.
I feel as good as I can feel about the end of a year, the end of cinema. But there's a whole nother year, there's a whole nother decade of cinema coming up. And yeah, I think that our list is 9 out of 10 dentist approved, so.
We'll be back for more movies next week.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.
You're the best and we love you!
And that's another year in the can.